Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom for our Shabbat Shuvah service. For those of you at home joining us, of course, as we're used to now, this hybrid community that we've created, and for those who have come to be with us in the sanctuary today. Shabbat Shuvah, as we know, is within this auspicious, slightly mystical time of the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I think it really, when we started to think all those months ago of what this service might look like if our B'nei Mitzvah, our Adult B'nei Mitzvah Class, who have been working since the beginning of the year, what if they shared this service today and brought their Torah reading of Acharei Mot, which is often read on Yom Kippur? What if we read it as an aid memoir, as a moment in our journey, our High Holy Days journey? So I couldn't be more delighted that our class are leading the service today. I can't think of a better way for us to be celebrating, marking, we as a community at prayer, how we value learning, prayer, and kind deeds to each other. This group has learned since January. They have led a service already in April via Zoom, and now they're here in the sanctuary. And they chose for their Tzedakah project, because we all know many of us don't want to ever do a service or mark a moment in our lives without thinking of how it could have positive repercussions for others. They chose the charity Keshet UK to support. Keshet UK is a Jewish charity that particularly supports transgender and gender identity learning within the Jewish community. Dalia came to talk to us. She was the most phenomenal educator. So I really see this group as covering Al Shlosha Devarim, on three pillars the world stands: on Torah, on Avodah, learning, and on Gimilut Chasadim, kind deeds. So I really am taking very little of the service, and I'm going to step back, invite you all to stand for Matovu, welcome each other. Those of you who are at home, turn your home into the sanctuary that you're used to making, and let's begin our service.
Elohim berov kasdecha, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotov, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So many times we have heard the phrase from Deuteronomy that Torah is not in the heavens. In fact, we are told, this instruction, which I command you today, is not too baffling, and it's not beyond your reach. Torah is therefore wholly ours, to interpret, to shape, and to live. But this is not always a straightforward or simple matter. The two parashot that we are reading today, Acharemot and Kedoshim, may both be about holiness, but I think it's fair to say that some of us have struggled with what appears to be obscure, even distasteful laws, and thousands of years of sometimes contradictory commentary. But this is both our struggle and our joy. Some of my Torah colleagues have chosen to grasp that struggle by reading and illuminating the sometimes difficult words of Acharemot, in which we hear of the death of Aaron's sons, laws for Yom Kippur, and some uncomfortable decrees about relationships. Others of us will read and chant from Kedoshim, which is often held up as a vision of social justice. Just as Torah is not in the heavens, so we are told that holiness is not a mystical concept. It is something very real, and it is hoped that through our study of Torah that has stretched and challenged us, we might take a small step towards a deeper connection with our own spirituality and perhaps our understanding of holiness as a community at FPS. And we now turn to the top of page 5 for Elohai Neshama.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi. Ata barata, ata yitzarta, ata nefakta bi. Ve'ata meshamra b'kirbi. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi.
Baruch Sha'amah v'haya ha'olam baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam ha'mehulal b'fi amo meshubach u'mefoah bilshon chasidav v'avadav bishvachot u'vizmirot megadelecha v'namlichecha malkeinu yachid chei ha'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai melech mahulal b'tishbachot.
Yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai, yama mai 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 mai. Yismachu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz yiram hayam u'melot. Yismachu hashamayim v'tagel Yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai mai mamai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai mai 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 mai, yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai mai mamai mai mamai, yama mai mai mamai.
I make music and compose sweet songs.
Anim zmirot v'shirim erog, ki elecha nafshi tarog, nafshi emda b'tzel yadecha ladat korasodecha, midedabri b'chvodecha, omer li mi eldodecha, yerav nasi ki alecha, ki nafshi tarog elecha.
Please turn to page 8 for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai
And then Sharon's come back
HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Sit down, please. We praise you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of the universe, maker of light and creator of darkness, author of peace and creator of all things. In your mercy you give light to the earth and all who live on it, and in your goodness you renew creation continually day by day. How manifold are your works, O God! With wisdom have you made them. The world is full of your creations. Your handiwork proclaims your praise. The radiant stars bear witness to your glory. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer Hamorot. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. Baruch atah Adonai habocher be'amo Yisrael ba'ahava.
Please turn to page 10 and stand, please. Thanks. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Va'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'kol levavecha, u'v'kol nafshecha, u'v'kol modecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha. V'shinantan levanecha, v'dibrata bam. V'shiftecha b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha v'derech, u'v'shachbecha, u'v'kumecha, u'kshartam la'ot al yadecha. V'hayu la'totachot bein einecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, Uv'sharecha.
ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 11. True and beautiful and good, sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and liberator. There is no God but you. Truly, you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You have redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then, with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you this song. A new song the redeemed sang to your name at the shore of the sea. With one accord they gave thanks and proclaimed your sovereignty.
Adonai Imloch leolam va'ed. Zu Yisrael, kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, go aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo, go aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Please rise for the tefillah on page 13.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
For those of you with the Siddur, we are also on page 383. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanura, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, v'Konei Hakol, v'Socher Hasdei Avot v'Imaot, Umevi Geula Lifnei v'Neihem, Lema'an Shemo Yachava. Remember us for life, for you, O Sovereign, delight in life, and inscribe us in the book of life, for your sake, O God of life.
בספר החיים למען
Melech Hosea o Mashiach o Magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'etzrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye Meitim Ata Rav Lahoshia, Mashiv Haruach Umorid HaGeshem, Mazriah HaShemesh Umorid HaTal.
Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye Meitim Barachamim Rabim, Somek Noflim Profech Olim Umatir Asurim Umakayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Mi Gamocha Bal Gevorot Umi Domelah Melech Meimit Umachaye Umatzmiach Yeshua.
Because we're in the 10 days of repentance, of penitence during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we are using a special tefillah service for Shabbat Shuvah. Hence we're on page 384, and why there are a couple of extra prayers that I mentioned that are not in the standard Bar and Bat Mitzvah service. Who is like you, God of mercy? In your mercy you remember your creatures and grant them life. V'ne'eman ata lachayot meitim, Baruch ata Adonai, meitim, mechaye hameitim. Nekadesh et shemecha ba'olam, kashem shemidashim oto mishmei maron, kakatuv al yad neviecha.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech kol haaretz kavodo.
Kavodo malei olam.
Baruch kavod Adonai b'makomo.
Divrei kodshecha katuv lemor.
Nimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Zion, Ador Vador, Hallelujah. Ledovador, 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 Nagir God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish, Ledovador, 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 Nagid God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish, V'shivcha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed, ki el melech gadol, ki el melech gadol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ledovador, 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 Nagid God Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish.
Baruch ata Adonai, HaMelech HaKadosh.
V'sham
Please be seated.
B'nei Yisrael, et HaShabbat, השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם, ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam ba'ahava tekabel, u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yira na'avod. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur hayenu magen yishenu, Atahu לדור ודור. נודה לך ונספר תהילתך על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. And because of where we are in the calendar, we read, may all who are loyal to your covenant be inscribed for a good life. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lehodot.
Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chem v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ועל כל ישראל עמך, ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד, באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל עמך, תורת חיים ואהבת חסד, וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל עמך, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל עמך.
May we be inscribed in the book of life and blessing for a life of goodness and peace. Baruch atah Adonai, osei hashalom. Let's take a moment for private prayer and reflection.
Song, Irefi, Behegion libi, lefanecha, Adonai tzuri, vegoali, Adonai Adonai tzuri, vegoali, Adonai tzuri, vegoali.
We turn now to the Torah service, Kriyat Torah, page 20. I am so supremely impressed by the smooth choreography of this full class gliding up and down the bima, allowing us to get to this moment, the sacred heart of our Shabbat morning service of Torah, with such poise and elegance. I'm thinking Central Synagogue, New York, eat your heart out this morning. So we are now on page 20. And I think thus far we've seen the joy and the commitment of learning, and so these words somehow mean even more today than usual. Let's stand. Assemble the people, the men and the women, the little ones, and the stranger that is within your gates, that they may hear and that they may learn and revere the eternal God and observe and do all the words of the law.
Ki mitzion tetze Torah, Ki mitzion tetze Torah, Udevar Adonai mirushalayim.
They're playing up our doors. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlu l'Adonai iti and aromama shavmo yachdav.
Echad Adonai Hagdula, Hagdura v'hatiferet, v'hanetzach v'haod, ki kol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, lecha Adonai hamamlacha, v'hamitnaseh v'chol l'rosh.
So this is an extraordinary thing. Please sit down. That our class was 11. All 11 are here. 8 are reading Torah this morning, and we have managed to find a yad for each person to allow us to be COVID compliant and safe. So each person will have their own yad to find their place in Torah. But before you get to hear the words of Torah, we get to hear the words of illumination of the Devar Torah from each of our students. So, and then we will call them up.
These are challenging chapters, 18 and 19 in Leviticus, and our group has tried to make sense of them in the light of a progressive view. Chapter 18 challenges us with laws around sex and holiness, whereas 19 offers us perhaps a more obvious way to be holy by decent interaction with those we live amongst. The juxtaposition of these is amazing. This year it is a double portion, and so we speak as a collective to both. In 2021, Torah cannot be taken 100% literally. Otherwise, we'd still have to offer sacrifices and stone disobedient children. So it needs to be reinterpreted in the light of a world of rapid and constant change. In the words of John Rayner, Judaism is both a splendid ideal and a realistic program of practical activity. The people of the Bible could do their part by following God's rules regarding sexual boundaries and food regulations. Now, the world is more complex and very different, with a huge population, greater gender equality, easier travel and less physical work. Thus, other things need to change in order to fulfill God's intention. Progressive Judaism is less concerned with ritual observance than with tikkun olam, and our role is to treat others with justice and respect by adhering to mitzvot that have been reinterpreted in the light of our ever-changing world. Nonetheless, we have loved engaging with these two chapters for the past 8 months.
As our conversations continued, 3 clear themes of holiness emerged. Holiness in our relationship with others, holiness in our relationship with the land, and holiness in our relationship with ourselves. We will walk you through these 3 areas, starting with relationships with other people. Chapter 18 lays down rules dealing with the Jewish concept of family purity. While it must be acknowledged that some of these rules have been used over the ages to persecute, to generate bigotry and intolerance, many of the rules do stand the test of time and have become universally accepted code of conduct for humanity. That is the gift that the Jews gave to the world through Torah. Some of the verses deal with incest and how to protect younger family members from the predation of older family members. As we know, this is sadly relevant today as it was when these rules were first laid down on Mount Sinai.
As I mentioned earlier, Acharei Mot seems so intimidating, harsh, and outdated to our modern ears. Rooted in the biblical narrative of Leviticus, the dilemma of staying close to God's word, yet being true to oneself, has given homosexual Orthodox men and women cause for much pain and suffering throughout the ages. Even today, sexuality in their communities has led to discrimination of various sorts, being shunned by families, expelled from synagogues, yeshivot, and even undergoing aversion therapy. But since the 20th century, condemnation of homosexuality is increasingly seen as outdated. Progressive Jewish thinking has applied new interpretations to this most punitive and controversial of Torah verses. Breaking with the shackles of patriarchy, liberal Jewish theology has promoted a moral position of equality and justice, inclusivism and respect for personal autonomy. Liberal Judaism accepts and is proud of all its members. There is an openness and pride in individual identity in response to the verses of abomination. Our abhorrence of these verses on what we now see as laws against LGBTQ rights and many other good things confirms our modern thinking that they have no relevance other than in the context of biblical study. They were written for Israelites living amongst societies where these practices were the norm. Why do we need to hear that child sacrifice is an abomination and women need protection from predatory men either within or out with their families? We recoil from these depraved practices. So why do we read them? Angela's explanation is that if we are to move closer to the holiness of chapter 19, perhaps we must continually be reminded of what humankind is still capable: child slavery, racism, rape, incest, the persecution of those who are LGBTQ+ or who are different in some way. These modern-day abominations are sadly no less relevant than they were in their original context of Leviticus chapter 18.
We turn now to a more easily understood, if not always applied, law, treating strangers who live amongst us with the compassion we would want to be extended to ourselves. In this time of a global pandemic, let's consider what it means when we say we are not safe until we are all safe. An estimated 1 million people in the UK are not registered and live off the grid. For these people, things most of us take for granted are not automatic. We have heard Amnesty International call on the government to address this by ensuring that everyone has access to safety and comfort. But would you register with a GP for the COVID vaccine if you were fearful of a call from the Home Office? In addition, we must acknowledge that not everyone has access to safe and secure accommodation. And that means that families are living with much uncertainty and deprivation of the most basic human needs. And finally, the information that people need about these and other essential matters needs to be made available in a way that is understood by them.
Thank you, Sharon. So you can see there's an enormous amount to learn, and we thought we would divide up the Divrei Torah between half before we hear from Torah and half afterwards. So now I'm really delighted to be calling up our B'nei Mitzvah group, and Chris, who will say the blessing, the bracha, on behalf of them. Ta'amod, ta'amod, hakafutza shel B'nei Mitzvah levarech v'likrat haTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai.
So all of you have the scroll beautifully made by our Josie, and those of you at home should also have it on the screen now so that you can follow the extraordinary journey through Acharei Mot, Leviticus 18, into Kedoshim in Leviticus 19.
Vaydiber Adonai el Moshe le'amor. Dibrei el b'nei Israel, ve'em ta Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem. Kama asa eretz Mitzrayim, asher yishvateim balo ta'asu. V'kama asa eretz Canaan, asher ani mevi ethem shamalo ta'asu. Uv'hukatechem lo tilachu. Et mishpatai ve'et tishmaru, ve'et hukatai tishmaru, lalechet bachem, ani Adonai Elohechem. V'shmoratem et hukatai, ve'et mishpatai, asher ya'asa otam, ha'adam v'chi bachem, ani Adonai. Ish el kol she'eh basaro, lo tikravo lagalut, arvat ani Adonai. Ervat avicha, ve'ervat imcha, lo tigala, imcha hi lo tigala, ervata.
Ervat eshet avicha, lo tigalel, ervat avicha hi. Ervat achotecha, vat avicha o vat imecha, moledit bayit, o moledit chutz, lo tigalel ervatan. Ervat vat binacha, uvat bitecha, lo tigalel ervatan, ki ervatecha ena. Ervat vat ishet avicha moledet avicha achotecha hi lo tigalel ervata ervat achot avicha lo tigalel eshe avicha hi.
Ervat achi avicha lo tegale el ishto lo tikrav doratecha hi. Ervat kalatecha lo tegale eshet bincha hi lo tegale ervata. Ervat eshet achicha lo tegale ervat achicha hi. Ervat isha uvita lo tegale et bat bina ve'et bat bita lo tikach lagalot ervata sha'ara heina zima hi.
Thank you. So we're just adding one line, just it felt too How could we resist this line of chapter 18, verse 22, that was Maureen's verse, the verse that has caused untold hurt and unhappiness and cruelty? How could we not read it and be reminded? Zachar lo tishkav, mishkaveh isha, to'eva hi.
ושמרתם אתם את חוקותיי ואת משפטיי, ולא תעשו מכל התועבות האלה האזרח והגר בתוככם. כי את כל התועבות האל עשו אנשי הארץ אשר לפניכם, ותטמע הארץ. ולא תקיא הארץ אתכם בטמאכם אותה, כאשר קאה את הגוי אשר לפניכם. כי כל אשר יעשה מכל התועבות האלה, ונכרתו הנפשות העושות מקרב עמם. ושמרתם את משמרתי לבלתי עשות מחוקות התועבות, אשר נעשו לפניכם, ולא תטמאו בהם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We now come to chapter 19, Kedoshim. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל כל עדת בני ישראל, ואמרת אליהם קדושים, תהיו כי קדוש אני אדוני אלוהיכם. איש אמו ואביו, apologies. איש אמו ואביו תראו, ואת שבתותי תשמרו, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אל תפנו או אל תפנו אל האלילים, ואלוהי מסך לא תעשו, לכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
ובקוצריכם אקציה ארצכם, לא תכלה פאת שדך לגזור, ולכת קצירך לא תלקט, וכרמך לא תעולל, וברד כרמך לא תלקט. לעני ולגר העזוב אותם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תגנבו ולא תכחשו ולא תשקרו איש בעמיתו, ולא תשבעו בשמי לשקר, והיללת את שם אלוהיך, אני אדוני.
לא תעשוק את רעך ולא תגזול, לא תלין Eolat Sahir, Ita Advoker, Lotakalel Herish, Lifnei Ver, Lotitein Mikshol, Ve'aretam Eloheha, Ani Adonai. Lotasu Havel, Amishpat, Lotisaf Nedal, Velotaheda Panei Gadol, Betet Sedek Tishpat, Amiteha.
V'hitavo el haaretz, v'natatem kol eitz mechakal, v'aralatem aralto et prio, shalosh shanim, yehiyeh kol prio, yehiyeh Adonai lechem, yehiyeh lechem, Aralahim lo yachal. Uvashana haharit, Yehiyeh kol prio, Kadosh hilulim la Adonai. Uvashana chachameshit, Tochlu et prio, Lo hosif lehem tevioto. Ani Adonai Elohim.
Mipnei sevatakum v'hadrata p'nei zaken, zeoreta me Elohecha, ani Adonai. V'chi agor retach hager, Be'etz rechem lo tonu oto. Ke'etz rachmikem yihiyeh lachem, hager hagar etechem, va'ahavta lo kamocha, ki kerim hayitem ba'eretz Mitzrayim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'hayei olam netav b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshem koach. And now the second half of the Divrei Torah, illuminating these extraordinary words that we get to hear again on Yom Kippur, but you have brought so much to these words. So if you lift up that step, I think for you, the rest of you.
We know that these verses apply to our 21st century lives, but throughout history, people have wrestled with applying them to their lives too. 494 years ago, Henry VIII was desperate to divorce Catherine of Aragon. In 1527, he convened an ecclesiastical court, arguing that Torah's commandments in Leviticus about sex with a brother's spouse and its consequential childlessness constituted a divine cause for the annulment of his marriage to the Queen, although Torah actually says something different about a widowed sister-in-law. Henry's elder brother Arthur had married Catherine of Aragon in 1501, but their marriage was never consummated, and Henry received permission from Rome to marry her in 1509. Catherine bore him one daughter, the future Mary I, but thereafter had multiple miscarriages and stillbirths. Henry believed he'd been anointed king by God, and that these two verses were specifically directed at him by the Almighty. He reasoned that Catherine's failure to bear a male heir was divine retribution for having wed his brother's wife. Today, we continue to be inspired by biblical law, but it is still instructive to observe how verses in Leviticus serve to change the course of 16th century history.
Torah gives us mitzvot, commandments, about our relationships with other people, but there's also a sense of our relationship with the physical world we inhabit. The idea of being vomited or spewed from the land seems to imply a relationship between people and a living land that I feel has been hard for the modern reader to comprehend. Many of us feel alienated from the earth, both by the distance between us and the agricultural processes on which we nevertheless depend, and by our ever more virtual ability to appear anywhere on the globe, while often remaining completely oblivious of our next-door neighbours. However, climate change, pollution, and the pandemic remind us that we cannot exist independently of our location. So the admonition to be wary of being vomited from the land can be seen to have a real and urgent contemporary relevance.
We get a second verse on human-land relationships. The verses I read tell us we shouldn't eat from new trees in their first 4 years of flowering or fruit. We let the trees grow, let their fruit drop, re-nourishing the ground, not picking them for our own benefit. We do the same with young children, letting them explore their own needs as toddlers. But my question is, should we be kinder to adults? Sometimes we glorify workaholics, proud of our exhausted, multitasking lives. Should we expect less from someone in their first 3 years of a new job, or a new relationship, or a new house? Maybe we should hold up this vital, gentle mitzvah with pride. Maybe we should enable people to nourish themselves, wait until their cup is overflowing before requiring they offer something to others.
The third area of holiness is holiness within oneself, what we choose to do with our own bodies, minds and spirits. I return to chapter 18, our more challenging chapter. My verses spoke of statutes and ordinances, hukat and mishpat. Maimonides understands these to be the two types of mitzvot. Mishpatim are those that are readily understandable, like the prohibition against murder or theft, whereas hukat offer no clear purpose, like keeping kosher. The book of Leviticus is quite heavy on the latter. In this week's parashah, we encounter shatnez, the prohibition of wearing clothes mixing different kinds of materials. As liberal Jews, these can seem quite opaque to us, but I believe we can find meaning in them. A few months ago, we read Parashat Tetzaveh, in which the Israelites were instructed to make sacred garments for the Kohanim, using an assortment of multicoloured materials. To put it another way, shatnez is prohibited, except where it's obligated. This distinction between the sacred and the mundane, even if it's sometimes complicated, is something that we can hold on to, and it is the heart of holiness, indeed the heart of our Judaism. The centre of the Jewish week is Shabbat. Through deliberate acts of lighting Shabbat candles on a Friday night Kiddush, we transform and sanctify the day. When on Saturday evening we light and extinguish the Havdalah candle, we separate from Shabbat from the rest of the week. So perhaps that is the point of shatnez.
We have studied these two chapters, both as a group and in Havruta pairs, choosing this morning to combine our individual interpretations. The first 4 verses of chapter 19 set out the parameters for the Holiness Code, where Moses is instructed by God to speak to all the children of Israel, those there that day and those yet to come. and deliver the command that holiness cannot be achieved by individuals alone, but only through everyone in the community taking responsibility and acting together. Our ancestors would do this by separating the sacred from the mundane to spotlight what holiness was and what it was not. That separation was not meant to be permanent, for the plan envisaged a time when life would be consecrated in its fullness and when all nations would worship God in holiness. What began as a process of separation was to conclude with the unification of human experience, the harmonization of humanity with the universe, and the creation on this planet of a just, compassionate, and humane society. Lo alecha hamlecha ligmor, v'lo ata ben churin lehivatel mimena. We have wrestled with what abomination and holiness means to us, but we have not completed our understanding. We shall continue our learning and invite you to join us in this challenge for Kadoshim together.
What a fantastic challenge for all of us to respond to in the midst of these days. We have, a fantastic challenge that there are too many of you to be on the bima at the same time, but I'm now going to ask us to stand and Stephen to come up ready to raise the scroll. I'm going to say that those of you on the bima with your yads handy, point out the section that you read from, and maybe if Maureen and Angela could be here ready at the foot of the stairs, all three of you can take us into the community prayer immediately afterwards. Stephen. Let's stand. Oh, I'm so sorry. It was going to be Stephen, but then we thought the impact of a woman might be even greater. So, Zoe, over to you, and Stephen, stay up here, because you're going to be opening the ark, etc. Stephen and Maureen, if you can... Yes, that's a good idea, Lou. Just hop on and be next to one of these microphones to offer the blessing for our community.
Eternal God, we ask your blessing on our Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, as well as those who govern our country. Guide them and all who govern our country with a spirit of wisdom and compassion, so that they care for the citizen and the stranger and bring benefit to all the inhabitants of our country and the world.
Amen.
Bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel. Bless our congregation and all its members. Be with those who seek your presence and all who are in need of health, healing, spiritual or physical. Let them know that you are near to comfort and sustain them.
May peace exist in the state of Israel soon and in our time. May you, eternal God, grant blessing to her, established as an age-old dream and home to the oppressed. May its leaders and citizens be inspired with a faithfulness to the aims of its founders, and may the country be imbued with the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice always. May this Shabbat renew our energy to build and sustain a better world and to deepen our gratitude of so much that surrounds us. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. So, Maureen and Stephen, I'm going to let you, as you're up here on the bima, get ready to open the ark, please. Just waiting for Dean's return to us. So we are just at the point of putting the Torah scroll away. We are on page 25. Yahalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado. Du al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren yamo. So just as we wait for Dean to come back and to put the scroll back in the ark, this scroll, just try and find that. This scroll that has been such a gift to you all and to us as a congregation, what you managed, the diligence and conscientiousness of your learning every Thursday night, of how you wrestled and challenged the text, how you chose and were happy to learn chapter 18, which many liberal synagogues, as you can imagine, have chosen never to look at again in a liturgical setting, have never chosen to read that chapter 18, verse 22, a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, it is an abomination. And yet you, as a class, as a group, chose to wrestle with the difficult bits of Torah as well as the life-giving bits. Leviticus 19, we will read next Thursday afternoon, that tells us in this tiny section, an oasis in the whole of that dry, tricky book of how to live as a mensch, how to behave well to each other, to the land, to our parents, how to mark Shabbat. And you brought so much joy to it. As a gift, Zoe and I, Zoe's a member of the group, but also a member of our team here, wondered what would it be that we would want to give you to mark this moment. And I decided that a bookmark, but a bookmark that was personal to each of you, a bookmark that really captured what you have done today. So I would really love it. There probably isn't room for all of us on the bima, but if you could gather in front of the steps of the ark, ready to give out these bookmarks to each of you, and I am going to read to you what is on these bookmarks, as well as giving all of you a blessing. And you too, Angela, please. So we know, and Danny said it so beautifully in April, where I was able to watch and not be with you, and I'm just so happy for myself that, never mind the congregation, that I had another chance at being able to share this with you. We know at the age of 39, Rabbi Akiva knew no Torah, didn't even know the Aleph Bet, and yet at the age of 40, Rabbi Akiva began to learn and became a great sage, a great teacher of Torah. And I think, Chris, you were 39 when you started this. So it was just too fantastic for words. You also came to learn. You came with a thirst for study and learning. For some of you, it was your first time reading Torah on the Bima, reading even inside the parchment of Torah. Annabelle last night said, what's it made of? And of course, you are now intimately engaged and knowledgeable of the ink on the parchment. You came with a thirst to learn. Like Rabbi Akiva, you embraced the Aleph Bet. Like Rabbi Akiva, you learned so that now you can teach, and I know that you all can. We share this blessing of this day with you for learning and growing, because you have become models of the love of Torah and the pursuit of Jewish knowledge. And I am really excited to see who's going to step forward next year because of you. It seems most fitting that Chris, at the age of 39, him and I, having a cup of coffee one day, he said, I would love this if we did this. And lo and behold, a group of people came to learn Torah, difficult Torah, and the result, the product, the end, culmination, zenith of that process is here today. So, Chris, you first. Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy because I, the eternal, your God, am holy. The first verse of Leviticus 19. I spoke on Rosh Hashanah of the rabbi who was berating other rabbis for bringing caution and safety into the synagogues over Rosh Hashanah, saying that we who in any way felt concerned by COVID were bleaching the synagogue of all sparks of holiness. Well, I can truly say, and I know you'll say with me, that this synagogue has been full of the sparks of holiness, gearing up to this day, and this day particularly. Goodness, how you have all brought sparks of holiness into our community and congregation. How your journey of studying, investigating, and challenging the text brought holiness. How your learning the Hebrew notes and letters also brought holiness. That's all we want from our tradition and our synagogue, to be a place where sparks of holiness fly. You unleash those sparks, and may you be blessed by them too. On three things, as I said at the beginning of the service, but we probably feel it even more so now. On three things the world rests: Torah learning, worship and prayer, and kind deeds, says the Mishnah. May you feel pride in your achieving of all three in this year of 2021 as part of the Adult B'nei Mitzvah group. Brachot lacha, blessing to you. Speak to the congregation and know that you are holy, and all the congregation became holy because of you. So Chris, for you, and let me just, Paul, for you. Thank you, Yeshua to you, and Stephen, where is Stephen? Stephen, to you. You have to slip it in your pocket as you hold the Torah. And Angela and Maureen, to you. And for you it says brachot lach, blessings to you in the female, Angela and Zoe and Annabelle and Paula and Bobby, you three over there. And we're going to ask you to just stay here for a moment, and Sharon and Lou, over to you. I should tell you that we have had tears and we have had laughter standing in front of the Torah scroll. So it feels so moving today as we say, behold, a good doctrine has been given you. Do not forsake it. It is, as we all know, a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace.
Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuvah Kadesh yameinu kekedem Kadesh yameinu kekedem. Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Yehelanu. Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Yehelanu. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulamo Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulamo Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulamo Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulamo Yisrael. Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Mazal Tov, Mazal Tov, Simman Tov, Yehelanu.
Let's go straight to Aleinu. We're on page 29 in our B'nei Mitzvah Siddur.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה לנושא בראשית, אשר שם ימינו ליגן את שמו, ונור עלינו להמליך מלכותו. אין עוד, 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 אין עוד. אנחנו קוראים, משתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ונושא ארץ, מושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, שכינת עוזו וגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו.
Been said, the eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day, the eternal God shall be one and known to be one. As we turn now to Kaddish, we think particularly of the deaths that have fallen within our community and beyond. We think of Susan Fiorentini, cousin of Jeffrey Lieberman, of Anthony Luder, son of Shirley and brother of Bob Luder, Simon Guillory, cousin of Lionel Lassman. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be for a blessing. We think also of the yard sites that fall in our congregation this Shabbat. We think of Sidney Fox, father of Adele Carr, of Mim Goodman, sister of Ben Hyde and sister-in-law of Debbie Dweck, and of Henry Grant, husband of Elise Grant, and Michael Salmons, father of Lillian Gelnick. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be for a blessing, and may those who recall and remember their loved ones, even those not on this sheet, be comforted in their loss as we say the words of Kaddish with you all. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Biama divra hirte viamlich malchute. Bahayachon uviomechon uvahaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Magala visman kari vimru amen. Yehi shmei rabba movorach leolam omer maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbrapam v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithada v'tale v'talal shemei dekudusha brichu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechemata. Da'amiram bi'ama v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya. V'aychayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Ose shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'al kol b'nei Adam. V'imru amen. Let's sit down. Kiddush, wine is being brought round to you, and challah that's been cut by one person. So 5 different plates will come round to you for you to take a piece of challah, keep it with you. In the meantime, I hand over to Tamara just for a couple of brief announcements.
Good morning, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom, and a very warm welcome to Finchley Progressive Synagogue, whether you are here in the building or joining us from home, whether you are a regular, an occasional visitor, or whether this is your first time with us, you are very, very warmly welcome here. Thank you to everyone who makes these services possible, with Rebecca's words ringing in my ears that these announcements will be brief. You know that I can't mention you all by name, but you know who you are, and we are really grateful for everything that you do. But I must, of course, thank in particular our wonderful Adult B'nei Mitzvah Class. I have to say I feel completely freshly again today, that sort of sense of astonished wonder and gratitude for what you have brought to us as a group. Really modelling for us how to wrestle with integrity, with what is difficult and challenging in our tradition, but also in your very different voices and approaches as we hear you all speaking to us today. Such a wonderful exemplar of the beauty and the richness that we are blessed with when we come together as a community in all of our diversity. Thank you so much for your challenging, powerful, beautiful and thought-provoking words. We're really very lucky. We're very lucky to have had a second chance to experience that. Thank you to you all. But I will keep the community announcements quick. We're beginning to get back into the swing of the new year with a return to our regular activities. Hebrew and delving into Judaism classes are back on Zoom. The details of all of our regular activities are available on the weekly email. Also on the weekly email, you'll find details of how to donate to our High Holy Days charity appeal, so do look out for that. But I want to encourage you in particular to join us for an in-person event today. We are celebrating Tashlich today. We'll be meeting here at 1 o'clock at FPS to walk together to Dollis Brook. And it's a chance for us to meet together outside without all of the restrictions and the complicated choreography that is still incumbent upon us inside the shul, and it's a beautiful, beautiful day for it. So if you're here in the building, why not stick around? And if you're home, come and join us from home for Tashlich at 1 o'clock. Our High Holy Days services continue on Wednesday at 7:30 with Kol Nidrei. On Yom Kippur, the family service is at 10. The traditional service is at 11:30. Again, for a complete list of our services on Yom Kippur, please see the community email. You can book seats for up to 2 services over the High Holy Days period. There are 50 seats available in the sanctuary for each service. But of course, you can come to all of them online, and we very much encourage you to do so. And that's all I have to say this morning, except for Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova.
Thank you, Tamara. So, Adon Olam. Adon Olam. On page 33.
בטרם כל יציר נברא, בעת נעשה וחצו כל, אזי yado of kidruhi be'etishan be'aira be'imruhi geviyati Adonai li be'lo
Let's stand for a final blessing. And this blessing feels so apt for today, for us here in this sanctuary, connected with all of those at home in this wide, expansive community we've become. Misha shiken et shamo b'bayit hazeh, hu yashkin benechem ahava v'achava, v'shalom v're'ut. May the one whose presence dwells in this house cause love and harmony, peace and friendship to dwell amongst you all. And let us say, Amen. So hopefully you have wine or grape juice ready for Kiddush.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam, Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti leolam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, uvayom hashvi, shavat vayinafash. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So Joseph's reminding me, keep the Torah scrolls as your keepsake for this amazing service. Who knows, it might encourage you when you get home to sign up for the class next year. And then you can put the B'nei Mitzvah Sidurim back. I just want to say, as we're about to head out, that I've got John in my left-hand side vision. And John Rubenstein, our Hebrew teacher par excellence, Torah learner, enabler, did so much, John, to enable this group to kick off, to start off, to learn their portions. John made individual packets, as only John does, spending probably 36 hours in one sitting doing it, for each one of you. And so I know you would want me to say for you that so much of your prowess, your skill, the beautiful way you read is due to John and what you taught. So Shabbat Shalom to all of you at home. I'm just going to go and help everyone leave the building, and then I'll come back and say hi. Joanna, welcome. So nice to see you. I sent you a message, but I'll come back and say hi in a moment.
Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Those who joined on